Hi, and welcome to the Wasteland Pirate YouTube channel. My name is Eric. I create costumes out of Malmö, Sweden, and I've been doing that for quite some time. And I'm here to share a little bit of how I make my costumes, some techniques I use, and some approaches I do when I design them. So if you're interested, let's dig into it. In this video, I'm going to show you an approach how to start a project, how I would go about when I'm going to create one or several costumes for a specific type of event, genre, or so forth. This approach of sketching is something that works better for projects that are made or rely on already made items. If you're going to make something that's completely custom made, like I made for a lot of my other builds, like the Vanguard, the Tyrant Champion, Sorog that I made for this year's Vakken, and so forth, there might be another approach that works better, and I'll show that in a future video. But just keep in mind that if you're going to do something that's made of like a more classic traditional post-apoc look, you can definitely use this as a way to get started. This is more so I have guidelines to make sure I hit all the key components and key looks that I need to have in order to convey that message of the costume design to the viewer. It might sound a bit pretentious, but it's something I use. It's a short exercise and it's quite useful to make sure you have an idea of what you're going to do before you get started, instead of just starting a costume and then kind of building as you go. So for this project, I already have picked a genre that I want to make. Not surprisingly, it will be post-apocalypse for this one. I also know what flavor of post-apocalypse I'm going for, or kind of what universe it's set in. It doesn't have to be something that already exists, but sometimes it's useful to play on things that people already know, or sometimes something that I am influenced by. Lately, I've been rereading the Metro books by Dmitry Glukhovsky, and I've also been playing the game, so I feel like I'm really into that Metro vibe. So it'll be post-apocalypse within the universe of Metro. I want to take my own spin on it and ask, like, what if the Metro happened in a desert setting, where basically above ground that would be desert instead? How would that influence the kits they have, the look they have, to still keep the Metro vibe, but also introducing something new instead of just repeating something that's already done? So what kind of character do I want to create? In my mind, I wanted to do the Metro variation of the Stalker, where this is a character that basically are the daredevils that go above ground to like gather all these important old things like fuel, books, or whatever else they can find out there. And I think that would be really interesting. There are some descriptions in the book. I'm also going to borrow a little bit of inspiration from the Spartan Rangers from the Metro Exodus game. If you're not familiar with those, I did set up a Pinterest board, so I'm going to share that in the comments down below so you can find it. I already have these things set out. It's time to get a bit more specific. Okay, what do I need to do to make something look like it belongs in the desert, that is something that belongs in the Metro universe, and that looks like a stalker? It's time to do a Pinterest board. And as I said, I already made mine, but this is whenever you're making your project, you should probably start yours. So I'm going out there on Pinterest, I'm looking for pictures of stalkers, of Metro, of things that really has the right vibe for me. It doesn't have to be desert Metro stalkers. It just can be pictures of people in the desert, like June. I have a few of those in there, just because I really liked how they used the big cloths and everything to set the setting right. I pick up Metro pictures just to get the Metro feel right, and I pick out pictures of something that is stalkerish or in the Spartan Ranger look that I kind of want to borrow from. Not copy, but borrow from. With this Pinterest board done, I start to look at each specific thing and identify items or looks that I want to introduce. To make it look at home in a desert, I wanted to borrow the big June capes, as I already said, the scarves. So that I'm going to write down. If I'm going to be in the desert, I'm sure as hell going to need a water bottle, so that's going to go somewhere on the kit. I will have some kind of sun protection for my eyes, maybe some sun goggles, that would be cool. And some kind of mask. It's maybe not just a gas mask, something that also stops the sand and so forth. And I write down these things. It's also important here to set the color tones, because that's so important when I look at all the desert things. It needs to be a dusty weathering at the end. No surprise there, but I need to write it up anyways. The colors will be more tan and khaki and brown. So those will go on a separate thing where I know these are kind of be the colors I'm going to strive for. Not only, but those will be the main colors of the build. Now, to get that Metro look, I look in just not only on the Rangers, I look at basically all of the stuff, and I find out quite quickly that there's this mixture between old and new. mostly even in the civilian things, which I really like, where you have these modern things mixed with like old leather stuff, and sometimes even the jury-rigged kind of metro-made items. So these are the kind of things I want to introduce. Everything has been repaired, taken care of. It's still a bit broken, which makes a lot of sense in the post-apocalypse. But for the metro, I kind of identify a mixture of old and new. There's a lot of leather details that I want to introduce. They are the metro-made items, and there's a lot of straps and ropes to keep everything down and make it fit. Maybe you don't find stuff that's in your size. So those are the things I'm going to write down. Moving on next to the stalker aspects. What makes them look like a stalker? Most of them have gas masks, which also rhyme good with what I already said for the desert theme. A lot of them have vests, some kind of mole vest or military vest or custom vests. So a vest will be super important. They have military gear, but not just any kind. They have a mixture between old, new, and custom metro made. So I need to find that balance. If I only make new stuff, I'm gonna look like a modern soldier, and I don't want that. So I keep going through this list. Most of them have boots. I identify a lot of them wear gloves, protective gear like knee pads and elbow pads. Yeah, and going forward, they have a lot of pouches. They have these knives. They also have the watch, which is very, very, I think, identifiable from the Metro game. So I'll have that as well. Filters and so forth. I can keep going forever, but I kind of limit myself to like the key components. I might not have to have all of them, but I need to have quite a bit of them to make sure I hit the mark for my stalker. Now with all of this Pinterest board done, my list done of things that I want to include, that I could include or probably should include to hit the spot, it's time for me to head to the workshop and to start sketching around with ideas. And what I mean with that is to have a bunch of stuff that I already collected throughout the years and kind of try them out and see what parts go where and how that create the correct look.
To start out sketching, I need a base, so I use a mannequin made of duct tape and a t-shirt. I'll drop a link in the comments down below of how you can make your own. After that, I just add a basic fabric to it and a mole vest. It's just some leftovers from a previous project. It's just a super cheap airsoft mole vest. With the base set up, it's now time to start sketching. And by sketching, I mean placing other pieces, objects, or stuff that I have in my drawers just to see how the shapes look together, how they're combined. And I want to do this temporarily, so I'm using these clips. These are used for sewing. Otherwise, you can of course use this stuff for a clothing line or whatever. Just find something to attach them. Tape usually does not really work that great, just FYI, but you can try whatever works for you. And at this point, I don't want to get too attached to any specific look. I'm just playing around with the shapes, taking a step back, and seeing how it works. That's what I really mean about sketching. We can easily erase at this point, just take away the clips, move a piece somewhere else, and see how that looks instead. I'm trying to avoid, when I'm sketching, to get too stuck into details, and you'll see I'll struggle with it a little bit in this video, and I always do, so I'm just going to be honest about that. Getting stuck into details at this point kind of clouds what we're trying to accomplish. What we're trying to accomplish here is to get the main shapes combined together to create an interesting design. Of course, during the process, we might get some great ideas for details, but save those details ideas for later in the design process. When I mean details, I mean smaller elements or shapes or solutions to issues with the build. Those things I usually save by either adding the gubbins to a separate box, I do a sketch or a picture of it, but right now I want to focus on the larger shapes. Wasting a lot of time on small details that I might end up covering can both be a waste of time, material, and be quite infuriating. So focusing on the larger shapes has helped me a lot more in my design process. It's also important to use templates at this point. Here I cut one out of foam that I intend to cover in leather later on, so it's going to be thicker, so that's why I use foam. Another one in the front that's in paper here and probably going to be redone in aluminum later on. I just use this for now, not to waste other material or time, because these are quick to make. I can see basically what they add to the build and how the shape plays with the overall other shapes. So use templates is a great way to not slow down your sketching process, and also when you're going to hit kind of the next stage where you're going to make them into real aluminum and leather pieces, you already have a base to make the piece from. I'm working more on the symmetrical design here, adding more to the upper arm on one side. And then I also beef up the shoulder with that gap there, trying some different things, but end up with a piece of tire that I will, of course, add a lot of more detail and refinement in later stages. But for now, I just want to see how it looks there to add to the asymmetrical style. With so many things attached to the mannequin with these clips, it's starting to fall apart a little bit. And it's a good time to work on the next iteration of the sketch. I need first to finish the back just to get some general shapes in there, but after that I really need to kind of decide on the things that I'm really sure about, the shapes that I really want to include, and then further refine those areas a little bit, make them a bit more permanent, and then work on a second kind of sketch on top of that, keeping some elements that I like at this stage, but also introducing some new. It's important to note, though, that all the elements, shapes, and objects I use are used within the framework of the list we set up before, for the stalker, the desert, and the metro look. I'm not trying to deviate from that, but working within those frames to create an outfit that really portrays and conveys those feelings to the viewer. I'm using the foam template from the shoulder, and I've cut out a piece of 2.5mm leather, and I'm just punching some holes in that leather. I use that to cover up the foam by first spraying down the foam with some fabric glue, covering it in thin leather, and then using this thick leather on top, basically creating a foam sandwich with other materials that covers up that it's made of foam. Of course, I'll dye this after this, but I want to stress and weather it and put it to all the way to 100% finished. Right now, I'm just making it a bit more finished, like 60 or 70%, so I can see how it looks with the rest instead of just having placeholders. And this makes it easy for me to work on the next iteration. First, I cleared the vest of everything, and I start to attach the pieces I just refined a bit more permanently using screws and washers. The piece here is just the foam clad in leather, and it's been dyed as well, so the colors look a bit more cohesive together with the rest, but they're not finished entirely with the stressing and weathering, of course. Using washers and bolts and nuts here is a really good way of just making sure you can try it a bit more permanently. I can also remove this from the mannequin and try it on myself to see that it's flexible, how it looks on me, and so forth. So it's a really good way of just attaching these things a bit more permanently. The main piece there for the armor has been remade from paper into 2mm aluminum with some details added. So basically what I'm doing now is just continue to work on it. I'll let all the bolts be long. I can always cut them when I'm done. I'm also starting to weave in the webbing a little bit more. So moving on with the next level of the sketch or the next iteration, basically what I'm doing is I'm playing a little bit more with the smaller and medium shapes and elements of the pieces to make them look more put together instead of just separate shapes slammed onto a mannequin with some clips. I just added the larger other shapes that I was sure about, and I was seeing how that looks together with the more refined shoulders now. It's starting to look way more cohesive, a bit better, and it's time to work a bit more on the next iteration of the sketch. Here's just some beauty shots of how far we are right now. And right into the next iteration where I added these parachute clips to the top, adding more levels and more materials, just to create a bit more depth. You can see the detail level has gone up quite a lot in this sketch. The back is still quite early in its iterations, but I added these parachute pieces to the back as well. I also added a aluminum plate to the arm with the same shape as the one on the chest. This is playing on basically a theme with variation. I reused the same shapes on different areas and different sizes to kind of play around with the look and creating a cohesive look with using similar objects in several places. I'm also going to add the scarf here just because we wanted that desert look, and I think from here it's time to refine it for the next time.
So we have a rough idea. I think that's enough for today. I'm going to head back next month and finish up the vest, do all the details, weathering and distressing, make sure that everything is connected, and then move on to the other parts. I hope you can join me for that. That's all I had for today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to do the YouTube stuff, subscribe, like, comment, and so forth. If you want to support me in my work, I do have a Patreon. It's down in the description down below. There's also a link to my socials if you want to follow me there of what I create, which is a bunch of different stuff. And there's also a link to my webpage if you want to check that out. But for this time, that's all I had. Thank you so much, Raider Scum. Take care and cheers.